people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Okay, we'll start with this. The latest as it pertains to Alicia Baumgardner, who still seems to be undisputed super featherweight champion and what could be her ring return. An update. I'll keep this short. Just wanted to say thank you to the WBO committee for formally terminating its show cause notice and adopting the WBC's ruling, which found that I was not guilty of doping. With the WBO's ruling a couple of weeks ago, I'm no longer being investigated by any boxing organization for which I hold a belt, and I'm again free to defend my title of undisputed world featherweight champion, super featherweight champion, wherever a fight can be sanctioned. So let's make it happen.
Wherever a fight can be sanctioned.
Seems a bit cryptic to me. So now both the WBO and the WBC have given Alicia the all clear to resume her career and return to action.
Even if some of the fans haven't.
The WBO and the WBC. The WBA just so happens to be the WBC's sister organization. And whatever stance the WBC took, the WBA, in all likelihood, also took.
And what about the IBF?
Well, you see what she said. She's no longer being investigated by any boxing organization for which she holds a belt. That would include the IBF, so she is free to resume her career, at least on the face of it, in her own words, wherever a fight can be sanctioned. But that does seem cryptic. So with the Michigan Unarmed Combat Commission having never actually dished out a suspension to Alicia, there would be no cause, at least on paper, to stop her from obtaining a boxing license in some other state under the auspices of some other commission. She can do that, though not without some criticism.
The alphabet organizations can publicly exonerate her of any wrongdoing. But in the court of public opinion, the sanctioning bodies themselves and their judgment is questionable, often convenient, corrupt.
A sentiment held by many a boxing fan that predates any of this. Alicia Baumgardner's anti-doping fiasco long before any of that happened. In the court of public opinion, it's been established that the sanctioning bodies themselves, they can't be trusted. They can't be counted on. They're not by some people. A Twitter user that goes by the name Ty, Mr. Keep It 100 Boxing, said, Alicia Baumgardner is proof that they will lie and cheat and still play the victim, to which Alicia herself responded, the people who actually have evidence acknowledged that I did not cheat, so your opinion is meaningless. Second of all, who the fuck is they? LOL. You sound like you're working out some personal trauma, or projecting, maybe.
And this is what I mean. That all four alphabet organizations, they can give Alicia the all clear because in their opinion, she didn't do anything wrong, but their opinions aren't trusted. And in the court of public opinion...
Look at Conor Benn's situation. It was the World Boxing Council that came to the conclusion that the banned substance found in his system might have come from consumption of eggs, based on Conor Benn's diet going into the Chris Eubank Jr. fight. But Conor never said that. That was never Conor's explanation. But that didn't stop people from holding him accountable, as if that explanation had come from him. The way things are, when people make up their mind, they make up their mind, especially emotional ones, and they're not going to change it. And in a court of public opinion, Conor is a dirty fighter, and Alicia is a dirty fighter, irrespective of what course of action or inaction the alphabet organizations decide to take, because the alphabet organizations lost credibility with the fans a long time ago, long before any of this started.
Before this.
What's concerning is that they're exonerating her on the predication that she didn't willfully ingest a banned substance, that finding a banned substance via an anti-doping test in her system does not prove that she willfully took it. But the same can be said for virtually any boxer that tests positive for any banned substance moving forward. It sets a dangerous precedence when you think about it, that any boxer moving forward can use this same defense. I can only deduce that perhaps the documentation that Alicia provided them with gave them more clarity on how they should proceed. You know, a lot of boxers test positive for a lot of banned substances, but not all of them do their own independent research the same way that she did. Maybe it's because a lot of them can't afford to, or maybe it's because a lot of them have been caught red-handed and they know it.
Like Robert Helenius after the Anthony Joshua fight. He professed his innocence, but he didn't really fight it. Veteran journeyman Kamil Sokolokowski, who is all but done as a boxer, he tested positive for a banned substance in boxing and migrated over to bare-knuckle boxing.
He didn't fight it. Maybe he couldn't. All he did was migrate to a different sport that perhaps gives him more leniency. He won his first bare-knuckle boxing match.
But in a nutshell, those two guys didn't do their own independent research like Alicia did.
That's the difference between her situation and theirs, though to some people, it makes no difference. They're still gonna view her as a dirty fighter. It's gonna follow her around for the rest of her career in some circles. She's just gonna have to take the good with the bad on that one, and the sooner they can get her in the ring, the sooner she can put all this behind her and get people talking about something else. In lightweight news, it has been officially announced, to the surprise of no one, that Vasyl Lomachenko will be traveling to Australia to take on George Kambosos for the newly vacated IBF title. Vasyl Lomachenko, who is coming off a loss like Oscar Valdez, is coming off a loss like Sebastian Fundora is coming off a loss. And what all these guys have in common is that even though they're coming off of losses, they are being afforded world title opportunities.
Dubious to some, but not to me. World title's gotta go to somebody if it's vacant.
What doubles as a world title opportunity in a rebound fight for Vasyl Lomachenko, who in the eyes of many should have got the decision in his last fight with George Kambosos. He got it, but he shouldn't have.
Boxing is funny like that.
A lot of people think that Vasyl Lomachenko legitimately beat Devin Haney, whereas a lot of people think that George Kambosos legitimately lost to Maxie Hughes. But boxing is a funny old game, this boxing. It's a funny old racket, but here we are. In any event, they're going to be fighting for the newly vacated IBF title. And I said it in my previous video, in spite of this being a title fight, it reads like build-up to me. Build up towards something bigger, because just the act of Vasyl Lomachenko fighting George and beating George and becoming a 3-time lightweight champion
seems like build-up.
Because the outcome of the fight seems like a foregone conclusion that even here and now, at this age, Vasyl Lomachenko should have enough left in the tank to beat a George Kambosos, because a guy like Maxie Hughes arguably beat George Kambosos. And Maxie don't compete and has never competed at the same level as a Vasyl Lomachenko. So if Maxie can arguably beat you, then Vasyl Lomachenko should be able to dispatch you.
It's a decent-sized fight in the land down under. It's a decent-sized fight in Australia. A familiar face in George Kambosos, a homegrown fighter, and even more familiar face in Vasyl Lomachenko, widely known.
It's not that big a fight in America. You could only draw so many people out with this thing because to most American boxing fans, it seems like a foregone conclusion that Vasyl Lomachenko should win. It's not that hot a ticket here. It's a hotter ticket in Australia because it features an Australian fighter, a local fighter, a former champion, and an internationally known fighter in Vasyl Lomachenko, and tack on that one of the Maloney brothers is going to be on the undercard, so you can better sell it down there than you could up here. And yet it still feels like a tune-up fight. It still feels like a rebound fight, even if it's for a world title. It feels like it's build up towards something else, perhaps something bigger, something more exciting, where the outcome isn't as easy to predict. That if Vasyl Lomachenko becomes a 3-time lightweight champion, if he procures the IBF title, they'll move him into something else. But what?
It just so happens 3-division champion Emmanuel Navarrete is going to be making his lightweight debut for what is the newly vacated WBO title.
Where initially I thought Top Rank's master plan was to get the IBF title in Vasyl Lomachenko's hands so that they could have him unify it with Shakur Stevenson's WBC title. Maybe he don't fight Shakur. Maybe he fights Emmanuel. Shakur's the one that's been carrying on about how he's going to be a free agent this year. He's been talking a lot about potential free agency. If he decides to leave Top Rank to go somewhere else, that's a fight that Top Rank can make. Lomachenko versus Navarrete for the IBF and WBO titles, provided that Emmanuel Navarrete can hold up his end of the bargain.
You think Shakur's gonna leave Top Rank?
I think it's a distinct possibility. I think that given his contract minimum, which is in the neighborhood of $2 to $3 million per fight, and how he performed in his last fight, when it comes time to renegotiate,
they're gonna have 36 minutes worth of booing in mind. 36 minutes of booing in the De Los Santos fight, in tandem with what it's costed them so far to do Shakur Stevenson's fights, and what, if anything, they've been getting back.
They're gonna want to lower his minimum, and he may not like that. He might decide he wants to try free agency out and see what he could get with someone else, because if they try to lower his minimum, that may leave him feeling so inclined to go elsewhere, take his business and his talents elsewhere. If he does, and he takes the WBC title with him, they'll still have the IBF and WBO titles on their side of the street, and this would be a fight that they can make, a fight between the winner of Lomachenko versus Kambosos and Navarrete versus Berenchek.
The show must go on.
And if Vasyl Lomachenko takes care of business, as many people expect him to, and Emmanuel Navarrete takes care of business, a fight between them could really be something. I mean, Vasyl Lomachenko may have enough left in the tank for a guy like George, but what about Emmanuel Navarrete? A volume puncher like he's a volume puncher, a southpaw like he's a southpaw.
A battle of the southpaws.
Spectacular fight, a shootout. Many people already feel that Vasyl Lomachenko has enough to beat a guy like George. He's got enough left in the tank, even though he's older and slower and more vulnerable now than he used to be. He should be able to beat George, but can he beat Emmanuel? Can he beat El Vaquero? That's a fight that you can sell in America. That's a fight you can do here stateside with the support of the Mexican-American fans, what is the lifeblood of the American market in today's boxing scene. You can sell that to them, with the angle being Vasyl Lomachenko's opportunity to prove that he's still got it. That if he can do a better job on George than Teofimo Lopez did or Devin Haney did, if he can stop that guy, then move on from that fight into this one with Emmanuel.
If he can beat him, unify those titles, then he's still got it. And he's still one of the best in the sport.
It's if he wins. If he loses, the fight itself would serve as a launch pad to launch Emmanuel Navarrete into the next stratosphere. A fighter, an entertaining one, that is not often thought of as being as skillful as a Lomachenko.
Unless he can beat him. And I like that proposition. I like that fight.
That if Shakur Stevenson leaves Top Rank still has ponies in that lightweight show. As it pertains to Shakur Stevenson and Emmanuel Navarrete, rather, his promoter, he described Shakur as being more boring than Sunday Mass at 3 in the afternoon. Fernando Beltran, who promotes Navarrete with Top Rank, was recently asked about a hypothetical fight pitting Navarrete, a titleist at 130 pounds, headed up to 135, against 135-pound champion Shakur Stevenson, and his response was one of visceral distaste, comparing a Stevenson fight to a certain sleep-inducing ecclesiastical activity. Let me change the question. Would you like to see that fight? I wouldn't. I wouldn't even like to see Shakur Stevenson in the ring against anyone. Needless to say, that Fernando Beltran is not receptive to that fight. And you can go ahead and accuse Navarrete of ducking if you want to. You can go ahead and accuse Fernando of protecting his fighter. You can do that, but how many people are going to agree with you? The problem with his question, who would you rather see Emmanuel fight? The problem with that question,
it's not that he's the one asking it.
The problem with it is the answer. Not his answer, but someone else's. Who would they rather see Emmanuel in the ring with? Would they rather see him in there with Shakur or Vasyl Lomachenko? And the same is true in reverse. Who would they rather see Lomachenko in there with? Would they rather see him in there with Shakur, or would they rather see him in there with Emmanuel? The problem here is not the question, but the answer.
He's more boring than Mass at 3 in the afternoon, said Fernando Beltran.
Regarded As one of the most skilled and defensively savvy fighters in the sport today, Stevenson, 26, nevertheless, has been criticized for playing it a tad bit too safe inside the ring. In his last fight against Edwin De Los Santos, Stevenson frustrated fans with his reluctance to engage. Even Stevenson admitted his performance was particularly bad. Now, I think Shakur Stevenson is a much, much better fighter than what he showed in his last fight. I think he's better than that. And I might be willing to give him a chance, but how many people feel the same way? How many people would take in a Shakur Stevenson fight? How many people would prefer to see Stevenson versus Lomachenko or Stevenson versus Navarrete instead of those two guys fighting each other? Them fighting each other, whether you like it or not, makes for a more entertaining fight that is easier to digest.
Just because the boxing scribes, a Joe Blow with a YouTube channel, tells you that Shakur is one of the most skilled fighters in the sport today, that doesn't make him one of the most entertaining fighters in the sport today. And it's supposed to be entertaining. It's supposed to be entertainment.
It's supposed to be exciting. It's why you tune in. And the others have been exciting, haven't they? Beltran said. Then referencing how Stevenson had Oscar Valdez chasing after him during their 130-pound title unification bout in 2022. Oscar was running circles around him, and he was moving. In fact, he's more boring than Mass at 3 in the afternoon.
I remember that. It was in the later rounds that Shakur Stevenson took to staying on the perimeter of the ring, shuffling, moving lateral, and
you could see why he was doing it. By then, he figured he's amassed a sizable lead on the cards already. He doesn't need to engage at all. He doesn't need to do anything anymore. Just make it out of the round, which is a poor advertisement for those in attendance and those watching at home, because they're gonna remember that. You might think to yourself that a win is a win, and it's enough to just win. But this ain't the amateurs. This is the pros.
He's got to scrub that mentality that a win is a win, and so long as you win, you make off like a bandit. That's the problem.
Making off like a bandit is not an adequate parallel for this situation, because the bandit doesn't have to come back and try to sell tickets. You do. The bandit, he goes off into the sunset and you may never see him again, but you're still trying to appeal to an audience, appease the audience, and you're not doing that with this minimalist approach to boxing. Just because the boxing scribes call you skilled, and some YouTubers do too, that doesn't make you entertaining.
I don't want to be too hard on him, because like I said, I think he's better than what he showed in his last fight. But this is reality.
People are not obligated to pretend they're entertained by you just because of your amateur background and how skilled you're supposed to be. This is the pros, and this is the real world. No, it's not enough to just win. Not if winning means boring everyone half to death, so you don't get in trouble, so you ain't in no danger. Your problem isn't that Fernando Beltran is tearing you down. Your problem isn't that he's calling you boring. It's that the paying public is agreeing with him. It's that the paying public is calling you boring. That they would rather see Lomachenko and Navarrete fight each other than either one of them fighting you.
Because you're boring, and they don't have to apologize for thinking that you're boring.
It's not their job to like you or your style of fighting, but it is your job to entertain them, because if you don't, well, then they ain't gonna want to see you. And if they ain't gonna want to see you, where's the money supposed to come from? The money you want.
He has to acknowledge that.
Or not. Or he can try out free agency and see who out there is willing to pay him what Top Rank has been paying him, to bore people half to death.